Hey everybody, Jekyll Speedy here, and it's part 3 of painting Ragnar here. We got the brand new Ragnar Blackmane, and in between videos I went ahead and did his base, super easy. You've seen me do bases a million times, but I wanted to get him to a full tabletop ready state before we get into really popping out those details. First color I'm going to be using is this brand new gray blue from Pro Acryl. Really nice icy gray blue, bright highlight color. And we're going to do all of the edge highlights on the armor. And as you can see here, what I like to do is get most of the paint out of my brush and then gently scrape the side of the brush onto those hard edges. And that way, on those really hard edges where light is reflecting off pieces of his armor, we get those laser detail highlights. And sometimes you can't always do this on every single detail of the model, so sometimes you will have to draw some lines on there. And the only advice I can give you is to take your time, brace your hands and forearms on your desk for stability, and try your best. I mean, it's not hard, but it's also not easy. Also taking the time to pop out some of these rivets around his armor and scribe some of those lines in. When you're doing edge highlights, always go thinner on your paint. Having a thin paint consistency can really help out. And if you have to do multiple edges to build up that color, I would rather do that than have squiggly fat edge highlights. Nobody likes those. Next color is going to be dark warm gray. I'm going to pull this out and we're going to do some matte highlights on the bits of rubber like the joints and also this little pouch that he's got on his belt there. Just same technique, getting most of the paint out of my brush and gently scraping along those raised edges and details for very clean highlight lines. Also going to use this color for the hair. And as you can see, I am not edge highlighting every single little detail. Really nice trick when painting hair, especially very voluminous flowing hair like Ragnar has, is to focus on the highlights and the volume part of the hair where the light is reflecting the most rather than every individual strand. It cuts out the variables for making mistakes by having fat lines or squiggly lines on bad edge highlights, and it also creates a more natural look. So we're only edge highlighting on the areas where the hair is supposed to be bright and shiniest. After that, I'm going to do a light dry brush for our wolf pelt here with some olive flesh. This is the same base color that we used for that tan color. And I'm just going to very lightly dry brush around the edges of the pelt to pick out all of that hair. If you want to creep those edge highlights in a little bit and do some light dry brushing on the browns of the wolf pelt, that's fine too. Looks fine by me. Just make sure to take your time and be careful that you're not going crazy on this, because we definitely don't want to get ivory edge highlights on parts of the armor and stuff like that. When that's done, we're going to highlight our yellow chainsword, Frostfang. I'm going to pull out this other new paint. This is pale yellow, and we're going to very lightly edge highlight the edges of the chainsword here. Just going around the top edge there and that little bolt at the top, just touching that with the brush to give it a little pop. And then I'm going to very gently create some little streaky scratch lines along the edges, pulling them over the flat surfaces, just so that way it gives us a little bit more detail on this flat surface and also gives the intent or kind of tricks the eye into thinking that it's a little battered and has some paint scratches on there. Next, I'm going to go up to Eye for an Ivory. This is a brighter ivory than olive flesh, and we're going to highlight all of the teeth that he's got on his his war gear here, all these little wolf fetishes. So all these claws and teeth, we're going to highlight that out, and then the claws on the pelt as well. And I also take the time to very gently, very delicately give a little bit of a highlight to his top row of teeth with his big wolf fang sticking out, just to pop that out a little bit. Then we're going to move over into metallics. This is thrash metal. It's the same neutral steel color that we use to base coat all of this. We're just going to pop out the details and bring a shine back to the metallic parts like these chains and the teeth on his chainsword. When that's done, we're going to work on the bronze gold trim using the same Viking gold that we did to base it in. And again, I'm just going to go over some of the details and hard edges and bring a shine back to some of those bronze gold pieces, especially the little shield thingy. I don't know what that's supposed to be called, like that big medallion shield on his chains there, the shoulder pad trim, and parts of his big belt. And then we definitely want to pick out the details on those bronze wolf heads on his backpack and the hilt of his sword. For those inlaid runes on his armor, I'm just getting most of the paint out of my little detail brush there so I can sort of dry brush over the inlaid portions there, so that way I don't get paint down into the runes. It's only picking out the flat surfaces. So make sure you're very careful when you're doing that. All you gotta do is just get most of the paint out of there. It's where you're just gonna scrape and dry paint over the top. Now we're gonna zoom in and we're gonna work on these jewels. At this scale, I don't really worry about the perfection of painting jewels or lenses. I just want to give a jewel-like effect that people can see across the table. So I'm going to cut in some dark red on some of these facets, and then we'll go up to a brighter red and then an ivory. And no, it does not look like a realistic gem effect, but at this scale, when they're this tiny on the model, and he's a 28mm model, and you're basically only going to be seeing him from 2 to 3 feet away on the tabletop, I just want people to look at that and be like, oh yeah, that's the shiny gem, I get it, rather than, you know, pick it up a few inches from your eye and really examine it as if it were a competition painting piece. Like, that's not what we're going for here. We're going to have a slick looking character that's going to look good on the table, and whenever I do gem effects like that, if they're faceted, I just do it like this, and if they're a round gem, I just do like a lens effect on it because it looks good at that distance. After that, I'm going to do the bright red. I'm just going to do a little bit less of this, kind of try to angle out those facets a little bit with the brighter red, leave a little bit of that black showing through just to kind of get that lens effect. And then I'm just barely going to edge highlight the little cross-shaped edges right in the middle to kind of pop it out. And again, yeah, I know it's not a realistic gem effect. It's not how they really look, but it looks great on the table, and people always know that it's a gem when they look at it, and I've never had a complaint, so that's why I do it that way. Now this step is optional. What I've done is taken our same gray-blue and thinned it out even thinner, and I'm just doing some little scratch marks along bits of the armor, just again to give it a little bit more detail, a little bit more character. If you want the armor to be cleaner, you don't have to do this. This is just a way that I like to weather up the armor without actually getting into some intense weathering steps like paint chipping and stuff like that. So the same as what we did on the chainsword is what I'm doing here. Just some little scratchy marks around the armor, gives those flat plates a little bit more detail, a little bit more character. And to finish everything off, I'm going to clean up our base rim. It's a little dusty and dirty from the gray paints that we did for the base terrain there. And I always finish out a model with a nice clean black rim because I like how it looks. You know, if you want to do gray or brown or whatever, go ahead, but I think black looks the best, so that's what I do on my models. Here he is. He's all done. Really excited with how this model came out. He's going to look great on the table, leading a force of space wolves. A return to form for the great Ragnar Blackmane. Hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial and got something out of it. We'll be back next week with a brand new tutorial. And if you check the description link in the video, you can see our brand new merch store. So go check that out. Got some really cool t-shirts and stuff like that up there. And I'll catch you next time.